Welcome to this panel discussion on solar PV rooftop with specific emphasis on policy and regulations. On the panel, we have Mr. Ronnie Khanna, the expert, and Mr. Dipankar Bishnoi and Ranjit Chandra from the DISCOMs asking the questions. Mr. Khanna, please do give us an overview on this subject.
Over the last 1 decade, we have seen that solar PV has become a very important technology. What has happened is that over the last 10 years, solar PV has garnered the most amount of investment in any energy generation technology. And this has been on the back of a number of factors. These factors include the realization amongst policymakers that climate change is a threat and renewable energy technologies like solar can help combat that threat. There is also the realization that energy security offered through these technologies will advance security of nations, and these technologies help combat pollution. They address issues like household energy security and allow available access to energy at all points of time. So what I'm here to tell you is that this is a very important emerging technology for the next 15 to 20 years, and what is the role this is going to play in our lives and how this is going to ensure that energy reaches the last man.
So Ronnie, why specifically there is so much of focus on solar rooftop? What are the drivers for it?
What has happened is that solar technology started getting promoted in the West. The earlier adopters were European nations, and in Europe, as you know, space is a big constraint. So there were two ways in which solar technology could be developed. One was through large solar-based field plants, which would take up a lot of space. But space was a constraint, and this was the same was the case in the case of Japan. But solar rooftop could be installed on top of roofs or on buildings where these were serving no economic purpose. So solar rooftop became popular. Now, a number of other drivers also have been promoting the use of solar. One of them is the fact that these technologies, if they are implemented on top of rooftops, actually allow utilities to deliver energy without any transmission and distribution losses. They actually allow consumption of energy at the point of generation, which actually is a very big economic benefit. The second reason is that by promoting solar PV rooftop technology, you are allowing consumer to actually invest in his own energy needs as well, and that empowers the consumer to actually bring in the investment, and that enlarges the market. And these are the primary drivers of solar rooftop.
So Ronnie, what are the major tools used by the governments to promote solar rooftop?
Ranjit, policy and regulation have been the two main tools that have been used by the government to promote solar PV, specifically solar PV rooftop. Now, to understand why this has happened, we must go back into history and understand that the cost of solar PV technology was very high. It is only about a decade ago that solar PV technology started declining. And what we have seen is that these technologies were out of reach for most corporations and individuals. So governments had to use specific policy and regulatory interventions to make sure that these technologies were adopted. Some of these technologies include metering mechanisms, procurement mechanisms, as well as tax saving mechanisms.
So what role do policy and regulation play in promoting solar rooftop, especially in India?
Ranjit, policies and regulations play two important roles in promoting solar rooftop in India or anywhere else in the world. The first, the most important thing is that any technology which is being promoted in a market mode needs to be financially and economically viable. The cost of these technologies was very, very high. It is still higher than fossil fuel technologies in some cases. In this scenario, there needs to be certain incentives, tax breaks or other mechanisms given to consumers for it to be financially viable for them to invest in this technology. The second is that our utilities or our electricity sector is very heavily regulated. Not anyone can come in and connect to the grid. So our policies and regulations actually provide the framework in which consumers, distributed consumers, household consumers can actually take these technologies, install them on the roof and connect them to the grid. So one, they provide access to consumers to invest in these technologies and connect to the roof, and second, they make it viable for the consumer to actually invest in these technologies.
So during past few years, the cost of solar technology has come down drastically, and few claim that solar power is competitive with the thermal power. So do we still need incentives to promote solar technology?
Ranjit, we have to put a little context here. We must realize that the cost of solar PV technology, which is now below thermal, is that for large utility scale ground mounted projects. These are projects located in deserts using wasteland. And these technologies actually are able to achieve these costs because of economies of scale. On the other hand, distributed solar rooftop projects are still more expensive. And these are more expensive due to higher transaction costs as well as limited size of the investment. Now these technologies still cost more than what a normal consumer like a householder pays in his normal monthly bill. And to promote this technology, within this specific consumer class, there are specific financial and fiscal incentives required, which may be in the form of some capital subsidy, a generation-based incentive, a tax break, or a non-financial, non-fiscal incentive, which may be that he may be allowed a higher FAR. So these are the policy and regulatory incentives which are required to make these viable.
So Ronnie, we hear a lot about these metering mechanisms like net and gross. What exactly are these mechanisms?
Dipankar, gross metering and net metering are at the heart of the regulatory framework for promoting solar rooftop. Gross metering has been used in a number of countries in Europe like Germany. Gross metering basically uses a concept wherein the solar rooftop system is installed on the roof of a premises and the power generated from that system is exported to the grid, to the utility. All the power that is generated is exported to the grid and compensation for that is given in the form of a feed-in tariff which is set by the regulator from time to time. And what happens is that, let us say in a month an X units is exported and Y is the compensation or in terms of the feed-in tariff, then at the end of the month the consumer or the investor gets X into Y as compensation. Now this makes financial sense because the feed-in tariff is designed to take into account all the costs involved in the generation of that solar rooftop PV power. So that is how it makes it viable for these consumers to invest in gross metering. In the case of net metering, the focus shifts. The focus shifts from sale of power to the utility to consumption of power by the premises itself. Solar rooftop plants set up on premises actually first provide the power to the premise loads. And in the case there is excess power, that is then sent to or exported to the utility grid and then it is banked there to be used at a later time when the solar is not generated. A very good example is that of how it works during a day. Let us say my plant generates 100 units during the day and I only utilize 50 units. The rest 50 are banked with the utility and they are then used in the evening when the sun is no longer there. So I provide 50 units to the utility during the day but take that back in the evening. Now how does it get compensated for? It gets compensated for in terms of the opportunity cost of electricity from the utility that I don't have to buy. So if I, let us say, pay X rupees for buying electricity from the utility and the cost of solar power is, let us say, X minus 1, then I actually save 1 rupee per unit of electricity that I generate for my rooftop, and this is the model on which my solar PV rooftop through net metering makes sense.
Then what is the impact of these arrangements on me as a utility?
Dipankar, there are both positive and negative impacts of solar PV rooftop promotion on the utility. On the positive side, there are basically savings that come into the utility in terms of savings in transmission and distribution losses. For example, you are generating at the point which you are consuming, so your losses are lower. When you are generating more at the point of consumption, your investment in T&D infrastructure goes down. And as the demand curve changes, when you are generating during the day where the energy is going to be required, your power purchase costs are also going to go down. However, there are also a few negative impacts. And these negative impacts also have to be contextualized. For example, in the case of gross metering, the cost of power purchase from gross metering is higher than the average power purchase cost. which means that the bill of the utility for purchasing this power increases, and this leads to an increase in the tariff for all the consumers. However, this is only a short to medium term measure, because as the average power purchase cost keeps going up, it touches the feed-in tariff cost, and after that the contribution of this power is positive to the utility's financial condition. So this is a short to medium term impact. In the case of net metering, the impact is a little more long term. It's long term because what happens is only the best consumers, or the consumers who pay the highest tariffs, actually they promote net metering initially, and that means that there is a loss of revenues, and that loss of revenues is high because these tariffs are higher, and this keeps increasing year on year over the life of the projects. Now we must also contextualize the quantum of these. In the case of solar PV rooftop, the quantum of energy that is being generated from this technology is very minuscule, and that is going to go up to maybe a single digit percentage also, and that is not going to have that much of an impact. So we must keep these in context and also balance it out with the positive benefits that come in terms of climate change benefits, energy security benefits, T&D loss reduction benefits, as well as the overall investment benefits that solar PV rooftop technologies bring with them.
So, Ronnie, who can own these solar rooftop systems?
Well, Ranjit, interestingly, the whole concept of ownership is embedded in the whole business model of how this sector works. And basically there are multiple business models that can be adopted to set up these rooftop systems. The initial business model was of what is called self-owned systems, where people who were actually installing these systems on their rooftops or their premises actually paid the money and installed these systems. Now the challenge with this was that the cost of these systems is very high, because solar technology does not use a fuel. It is only the capital cost which is there, and that is relatively high. So a lot of consumers did not have the financial means of investing in these systems. So to promote it, or to allow more and more investors to come in, a new model was formed, which is called the third party investment model, where a renewable energy service company came in and invested on someone else's rooftop and basically made a profit out of it. Now how that works is very simple. That was combined with gross and net metering. So in the case of how we do gross and net metering, instead of the rooftop owner doing it, a third party was allowed to do it and charge either the utility in the case of gross metering or the rooftop owner in the case of net metering for the solar rooftop PV power generated. As far as the regulation is concerned, the regulation is very clear. In terms of self-owned systems, there is no challenge. A consumer can actually always put up captive plants and use that energy. The problem comes in when third party or RESCO models come in. Our Electricity Act 2003 says that in a given area of the utility, only the distribution utility has the power of selling power to the consumers. Now, in the case of RESCOs, there is a third party who is not a distribution utility coming and making this sale. However, this was addressed in the specific regulations that have been given out by the FOR. The draft model of regulation for net metering by the Forum of Regulators addresses this issue, and this has been carried forward to state regulations by the state electricity regulatory commissions. So most states now allow third party investors to come in, invest on someone else's rooftop and sell that power. So that is now addressed. So two main ownership models are there, self-owned and third party.
What are the major parameters I as a utility engineer should look for in the regulation?
So Dipankar, the sizing of the system, the solar PV rooftop system, depends on the provisions that have been highlighted in the regulation around parameters like connected load, annual energy consumption, and the loading of the distribution transformer. These are the things that you need to go and refer to the regulation and check up before allowing any system to be set up.
Ronnie, how do net metering and gross metering arrangements affect my metering and billing operations?
In the case of gross metering, the solar PV rooftop system is treated as a separate entity which has its own transactions. So therefore, the owner of the rooftop system raises a separate invoice based on the readings on a separate solar meter different from the consumer meter, and this is compensated for or paid by the utility. So therefore there is not too much of a difference in terms of how you bill a consumer. You just add another generator to your system. In the case of net metering, a net meter is installed which basically reads the export and the import. In case the import is more than the export, you basically charge the bill, or you basically bill the consumer for the energy that he has consumed, like you would do in a normal cycle. However, in case of more export, you basically have to show that on the bill and give him credit for it in subsequent billing cycles. That is the only difference.
So Ronnie, the credit you referred to in the monthly bill, so when is it settled, or it can be used anywhere in the future?
Ranjit, what happens is that each and every regulator and the utility define a settlement period over which this excess energy can be carried over to the next billing cycle. This is usually from April to March for most utilities. Now what happens during this cycle is that excess exports are carried over till the end of the settlement period. At the end of the settlement period, the utility may decide to compensate the consumer for excess generation, either by giving him what is the equivalent of an average power purchase cost, or the cost which the consumer himself pays to the utility for excess generation. In some cases, the utilities and the regulators do not give any compensation for this excess power because they feel it is beyond the scope of the regulation.
Now Ronnie, a lot of consumers come to us asking our help on the application procedure. So how to address that?
Dipankar, each and every regulation defines how a consumer can actually connect their system to the utility grid, and this is done through the interconnection framework and process. A number of regulations actually already have a large proportion of the interconnection framework and procedure outlined in them. Other regulations actually give this responsibility to the utility, and the utility is actually supposed to develop and give to the public or outline to the public or the consumers what is the interconnection procedure, what are the steps for it, what is the documentation required at each and every step, and what are the timelines. And these are usually found on the utilities website or with any utility office that you might want to visit. So I would suggest that whenever any consumer comes to you, you please point them to either the website or ask your head office for more guidance.
So Ronnie, do these regulations have any provisions for standards and safety?
Ranjit, these regulations deal in detail with the standards and certifications which are connected with the safety of these solar rooftop systems. A number of these regulations actually outline the specific standards that are required for connecting these systems to the grid. They deal with issues related to voltage, DC injection, harmonics, etc. in detail. While a number of them don't actually go into that much detail, but they refer to the Central Electricity Authority's regulations on these. They refer to them within the regulation, and in a way they also address these in the same process. So yes, either directly or through CEA regulations, the regulations address the safety standards and certification requirements.